I am back with a build video after a long hiatus, but Bungie seems to finally kind of got their stuff together a little bit, so I'm going to bring you a build video again. And this is my favorite current build. It is the Buddy Master. We are running Hellion. We have Arc Soul from Getaway Artists, and then we are slinging a ton of Threadlings. This just does really great constant damage. It's throwing verbs everywhere. There's Jolt, there's Scorch, there's Volatile, there's Unravel. It's just every kind of damage over time effect you can at once. Buddies are doing tons of work, and they now scale super strong. There's this anti-barrier here that I don't even have the weapon for, so I'm just going to brute force it with everything I've got, and it still happens. This is Grandmaster difficulty, 25 power under, thanks to the new rework, and just really easy. We're doing a turret, we're just blasting this thing. It keeps shielding, but I'm just going to brute force it because I'm stubborn. But with everything, it just finally gets shredded, and then we look over at this boss, and it's just going to fall over right after that. Once again, I think this build's really fun. It has everything about the buddies, and it's just great. If that sounds good to you, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. I miss doing that. Just for a build overview, the goal is to gotta catch them all, Destiny buddies. We're gonna have so many buddies and verbs on there, and we just really want to do consistent damage from as many sources and verbs as possible. I've tested this at 25 power under. I can't get any lower than that because I just haven't got up to the power level for it, but I'm sure it's going to be just as good on ultimate content at -30. It's not that much different. On the pro side, very easy gameplay. You pop your grenade, you pop your class ability, and then you just kind of run around and shoot whatever you can, and that's it. It's doing lots of concurrent damage. All the verbs, just every verb you can think of, you were getting out on the field. The only cons on it, healing can be a little bit difficult at bosses, and that's pretty typical of most builds, but you have a great pocket heal in Phoenix Dive, and you can generate a lot of orbs, and those two things together will help you out a lot. If you're trying to get weapon kills, it is honestly extremely hard in this build. I actually recorded gameplay in a different solo op where I had to get precision kills, and it took me so long to get precision kills because buddies kept stealing them, and it can be kind of painful. I will say if you play this too much, and I know this from back in the final shape, it can get a little bit boring gameplay wise. The buddies are doing so much of the work that you really don't have to do that much, so definitely switch it out, try out some other builds. If you need some other ideas, I have plenty of them right now. There's lots of cool stuff going on. And the really nice thing is that now that unstable cores are on the way out, you can try as many builds as you want. And this is why I've come back to build crafting, because I hate that feature so much, and it made it so hard for me to test out builds and make these videos. But now that that era is over, we can get back to the good stuff. First, let's talk about our exotic Getaway Artists. This was really popular back in the final shape because with Prismatic, it would let you have Arc Soul on Prismatic, and it was the only way to get it. Now this does require the Forsaken pack, and you can get it from Zur or Rahul, but pretty easy to get too. And what this does is if you have an arc grenade ability equipped, you can hold grenade and you summon a sentient Arc Soul, and you give yourself Amplified. And Amplified is 15% damage resistance and makes enemies less accurate, which is great. That is just flat damage resistance that you can keep up almost all the time. Now, one thing about this that a lot of people don't know, and this was a nerf that came back in the final shape to make this just a little bit weaker than it launched with, is that Sentient Arc Soul gives 5% grenade energy on each burst as long as it damages an enemy. But if you have Devour equipped, whether it's from Feed the Void or some other source, you do not get this grenade energy, so you lose half the exotic perk if you're using Devour. Now, Devour is good, but I think we actually have some better options there, and I'll get into that in just a minute. Very briefly, I did do some testing with buddies. If you follow my channel, I did a quick little text post about it, but for reference, the buddies that were buffed are Ionic Sentry on Arc, Arc Soul, which we were talking about here, but it is also on Arc, Hellion on Solar or Prismatic, Bleak Watcher, which is on Stasis or Prismatic, and Child of the Old Gods on Void. All of these get boosted by the grenade stat for damage, so you can get up to 65% extra damage. There has been some notes in the community that some of these might be tuned slightly differently, and I know ignition from these is not affected by the grenade stat, so that is slightly weaker on Hellion, but once again, this is just great. Honestly, what is cooler though is that they made every grenade-based effect apply to buddies, and the coolest ones are Fragments, Facet of Dominance, and Spark of Shock, which will provide Jolt on arc grenades, work with your Arc Soul or Ionic Sentry. Those Arc buddies will now jolt, which is crazy. Facet of Bravery and Echo of Instability, which give you volatile rounds on grenade kills, work with every single buddy. It doesn't matter if they're void or not. If a buddy gets a kill, you have volatile rounds, which means you have almost 100% uptime on it if you're using this build. Facet of Mending or Ember of Resolve on Solar, which gives you a cure every time your grenades get a kill, also work with buddies. And this is basically like Budget Devour, and it's pretty great. And it's just a fragment instead of using an aspect. Grenade mods apply fully. Firepower will make orbs on your buddy kills. Ashes to Assets will give you super energy on your buddy kills. Bolstering Detonation and Momentum Transfer will also work, though they have a cooldown. Verity's Brow also will boost the damage of all of these, but the tricky part is, as I mentioned, it is hard to get weapon kills if your buddies are very strong. So you kind of have to fight for kills. So that one's a little bit hard to keep up, but I still think there's probably a good way to do it on one of these subclasses. Back to this build. First, our aspects and abilities. We absolutely want to take Hellion, and it is very strong. This is a solar buddy that just scorches and will eventually build up to an ignition. It lasts for 20 seconds every time you use your class ability. Super easy, super great, consistent damage, and I love it. Typically, what I've seen here is Feed the Void. It's fine. It's healing. It's a little bit more grenade energy. It will deactivate half of Getaway Artist perk. And then after that, I often see Bleak Watcher, which once again is also good, but Bleak Watcher does no damage. It does crowd control enemies, but we're just killing them. We don't need crowd control. Our highest delta is -30. Let's just kill them. And larger enemies like bosses, the freeze is pretty much useless. You'll get like a little shatter and that's it. So what I recommend is actually Weaver's Call, which has been buffed recently and has 3 fragment slots, but this will generate Threadlings anytime you get kills. Every 3 kills, you will generate a Threadling. And every time you use your class ability, you also just create 3 whole Threadlings. So we're going to be doing that pretty consistently for Hellion. So it's just more Threadlings. And then as our buddies get kills or we get kills, it's just constantly generating Threadlings that you can send out by doing melee attacks or doing any kind of weapon damage. This is flexible, whatever works for you. You might have to tweak this for boss fights. Maybe you want to switch these up for survivability, but this is what I found to be very effective. And the nice thing about Weaver's Call too is it completely covers your Transcendence energy generation. I've never had to really worry about that. It's always ready for me when I need it. And that can be very helpful for DPS situations where you need weaken from the grenade or you need the extra damage resistance from Transcendence. Any of that, it's available. For the super, generally recommend either Song of Flame or Nova Bomb. Those are your 2 best supers. Song of Flame is 90% damage resistance and really great consistent add, clear, and damage. Nova Bomb is the strongest Warlock super for single target damage in the game. Very good. For the grenade, you have to use Storm Grenade or Getaway Artist does not work. For the melee, we use Arcane Needle because it's the best and it gives us another verb and unravel that we can't get anywhere else on this build. Lastly, for our class ability, we want to use Phoenix Dive. It's the shortest cooldown and it lets us use Hellion more often, and it's also the best panic heal. You just use it anytime you're low on health and you're pretty much back to full. Moving over to our fragments. I pretty much always take Facet of Protection because damage resistance is great. Facet of Dominance, I highly recommend because that gives you Jolt on your Arc Soul, but also weaken on your Transcendence Grenade. Facet of Bravery is nearly 100% uptime on volatile rounds, so make sure you use a Void Weapon, but if you don't need this. Mending is a Cure 1 heal on anybody kills, which will happen consistently. There's not a cooldown on this, so it's just constant healing as long as there are things to kill. Facet of Hope will give you plus 40% base class regen when you have 1 elemental buff, and when you have 2 plus elemental buffs, you can get 60% base class regen. A few things just to note here. We will have amplified nearly 100% of the time thanks to Getaway Artists, but if you have a class stat that is just over 100, the overshield from that does count for this, which is really cool. There's lots of different ways to get these buffs, whether it's from the artifact, but it just helps keep that class ability ready because you want to have it for panic heals and just to constantly keep Hellion out there. Some alternatives that you might want to look at. Facet of Purpose is really good for an extra source of healing. If you do need a little bit more healing, we are making so many orbs. I would take this and use Song of Flame because every one of those orbs will give you restoration for 5 seconds, and that's just insane. If you're using Nova Bomb, you get Void Overshield, which will give you a second buff for Facet of Hope, but there are other ways to get that too, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Lastly, Facet of Solitude is just great. If you get rapid precision hits on an enemy, you will sever them, which is a 40% outgoing damage reduction for that enemy, which is just great on bosses. If you need even more resilience and less damage during boss phases, that's a very good option to switch to. Moving over to our mods and Armor 3.0 stats, we are going all in on grenades. I'm doing 2 Ashes to Assets on the helmet. I'm doing triple firepower because that lets us make an orb every 1 second. So every second, if your buddies are killing, you get an orb. very good. You can also consider going for a font of grenade if you want a little bit more stat there and just get a little bit more damage. Once again, I haven't really found the need for it, and there are other ways to get some grenade stat from our weapons, which I'll talk about in a minute. We don't really have much need for armor charge on this. You can run some fonts if you want to, but once again, weapons aren't really the focus of this, so I've just used orb mods that can give me a little bit of ability energy. If you're having trouble with healing, run 2 copies of recuperation, because that will take the heal from 15 HP per orb to 70 if you use 2 copies. And you can also build into the health stat if you need to increase that further. Lastly, I would take a Reaper mod. It's just one more source of orbs, and we will be using our class ability pretty frequently, but not more frequently than 10 seconds, so you don't need more than that. Also, powerful attraction on the class mod is extremely valuable to pick up all those orbs quickly, so definitely keep that. On the stats side, we want to focus on grenade. We also want to keep class up. Super is fairly important because we want to keep that up as well. Melee is kind of lower priority, but you want to keep it rolling. Lastly, there's weapons. I don't find much need for this. You might find more need for it if you're running a special weapon or using a lot of heavy ammo, but that's pretty much it. Health, you can pretty much dump, but if you really need extra healing or you can't fit 2 recuperation mods, maybe you take this. But I think there's better places to put your stats. Briefly talking about armor sets, I looked through all the armor sets, and the most important one I found was the Smoke Jumper 2-piece set. I'm actually not using this in the gameplay. I need to just rework my build a little bit so that it equips these, but with the 2-piece bonus, every time you pick up an orb, you get 45% damage resistance that decays down to 15% over 5 seconds. 45% damage resistance is insane, and as I said, we make a lot of orbs. This is pretty cool. On the 4-piece set, you'll get more special ammo progress and heals on finishers. This isn't as important. You can mix this up and go with 2 different 2-piece set bonuses, or just not worry about it, but all this is pretty great. There are artifact mods. These are not too critical, but there's just a few. These are columns 3, 4, and 5 respectively on here, so I haven't included everything, but just the ones that I thought were important to highlight. Pack Tactics is a pretty good option. It makes your Threadlings do more damage as they get hits, and that can go up to 30% increased Threadling damage, which is great, and they can stun unstoppable champions, which is very helpful. Kadara's Darkness will just let your solar damage be increased by 30% on Darkness debuff non-boss combatants, so that's just your general ad clear, but making Hellion even stronger is just awesome. And it's pretty easy to get Darkness debuffs out there. You just throw an Arcane Needle out there, and the Unravel should scatter around a good bit and just keep that damage buff up. Also in column 4 is Elemental Coalescence. Upon scoring 4 to 7 kills, you spawn a super matching elemental pickup. So if you're using Solar, you'll get Fire Sprites. If you're using Nova Bomb, you'll get Void Breaches, and those are both very good because they help with your ability regen. Over in column 5, we want Shield Crush because that will increase our grenade regen, and it will increase our grenade damage even further, which we want to take every bit of that we can to make these buddies absolutely ridiculous. And then most of the other perks in this column aren't too crucial, but I was looking through these and Arctic Quiver is kind of nice. We have a good bow option here, and this lets you do 35% increased damage with primary ammo bows, which is pretty insane. And once again, we have no use for armor charges, so this is a good place to put those. Briefly talking about weapons. I'm gonna say this up front, the weapons are very flexible. I would recommend a Void weapon because we want to get those volatile rounds up. Some current ones, Aisha's Embrace from Trials, Fortunate Star from Solstice if you played during that. And then over in the core playlist focusing, you have Lotus Eater from last season. That is a Void Rocket Sidearm from the Vanguard focusing. Joxer's Longsword is a 2-round burst pulse rifle that's very good from Crucible focusing. And then in Trials, you can focus Exalted Truth, which is a really solid hand cannon that works out pretty well. And you can really use anything here. I mean, there's so many great Void weapons in the game, but I tried to include mostly newer ones. Now, I mentioned earlier that we can get grenade stat from other places, and the source of that is the perk Blast Distributor. And this will, when you get hits with the weapon, give you grenade stat, and it's unenhanced 10 grenade stat per hit, and it's 13 when it's enhanced, and that stacks up to 5 times, which give you 50 to 65 grenade stat, which is crazy. If you played Solstice, hopefully you got a Festival Flight with this. That is a Strand area denial grenade launcher, and you can shoot this in an enemy or a group of enemies and rack it up to max stacks immediately and just immediately get a huge boost to your grenade damage. 50 stat would be, if you're below 150, that's about 32.5% extra grenade damage just for shooting this at an enemy. So just extremely good. It's buffing every single one of your buddies. Now, if you really want to go even more into the buddies, I've been using Finality's Augur. If I just want some extra tripping damage on boss, it is really good, and it's featured, so it's getting that 10% damage buff buff that will eventually be reduced. As I mentioned though, this is very flexible. See what works for you. I just definitely recommend a void weapon, and that's pretty much it. Okay, here is a longer gameplay segment from Reclaim. This is the final boss section. Just want to show you a little bit of gameplay. You see we throw out our buddies, we deploy some Threadlings, and they just churn through stuff. And then once we have our buddies up, you can switch over to Transcendence. And that lets us get the weaken, so we can just boost our damage even further. Putting a turret up, just really trying to churn as much damage as possible. And then I'm going to shoot that area denial, get the boost up. I really wish I could see more than 4 buffs at a time, because I know I have like 17 buffs right now. I will say I do have one activity buff on here, and it just gives me some bolt charge periodically, which is really effective on this build because all these abilities will discharge bolt charge. So as soon as you're at max dex, it's instantly going off, but really fun. I'm using Song of Flame once again. Very strong super, great damage resistance. If you're in a pinch, pop it, your class ability will come back immediately, and you can heal, and you get that 90% damage resistance on top of everything else. So that is very good. Teammate is taking care of this little puzzle right here, so I'm just going to make sure everything is cleared. We fortunately get some very big wyverns here. Being surprisingly passive though, but best to take them out. Buddy, lightning, Threadlings. You can just see over time we've accrued like 6 Threadlings there, and just throwing them out, trying through these enemies. I'm using that void bow I was talking about, Fortunate Star. Very effective. Very good void rounds. I also have demoralize on it, so I can weaken crowds if I need to. Just lots of verbs on this. Again, deploy those Threadlings. A lot of people knock on Threadlings and their AI is bad sometimes, but they do some great damage, and they keep getting buffs because they keep thinking that damage is the problem, and it really isn't. But I will take every single buff to them I can get. It's great. You can see our health got low there, and then we just Phoenix dive and redeploy our Hellion, and we're back up to full health in a second. Alright, boss is vulnerable again, and we are just going to absolutely decimate this guy. Throw a Tangle out, we shoot a couple enemies just to get some orbs and stuff. Gonna put Unravel on the boss, gonna put our turret up, we are going to get our Arc Buddy out, put Hellion back up, and then just watch this boss's health absolutely destroy. You just see it steadily chunking down. Everybody's kind of working on it. Have our super back, but we don't even need it. And that's pretty much it. Just to show you the match results from that, I ended up having about 60 more kills than my teammates, and they were doing a good job. I ended up making 74 orbs, and this was a relatively normal kind of slow run. It took like 17 minutes, but most assists, most kills, most orbs created, and I didn't really break a sweat. I did this at the end of the day because I was tired, and pretty easy. And once again, this Grandmaster difficulty, and it has fixed deltas from now on, so pretty straightforward. Just going over the gameplay loop, as you saw, it's not complicated. Eat your grenade, use your class ability on cooldown, or you need healing. Then just keep shooting and deploy Threadlings, and that's pretty much it. That's all you gotta do. Just make sure your buddies are shooting stuff, and you shoot some more things. On bosses, just make sure you deploy your buddies, and then you can use your super, you can pop Transcendence, and just unload your weapons. But you wanna keep those buddies freshly deployed before you go into super or Transcendence, because you can't update your Arc Soul while you're in either of those. And that's pretty much all I have for the build. As we wrap up, I just want to say thanks to my supporters. I understand it's been a bummer that I haven't made videos pretty much since shortly after Out of Fate launched. There have been a lot of changes that were not good. I've talked about them. Unstable cores is probably the worst one for me in just the general power grind of things, but I really think they've fixed most of my core issues. Unstable cores are going away. They just gave us a huge pile of them. Beyond that, they've reduced the power grind a little bit, made it a little bit smoother, and just also given us some really good sandbox changes, which I think was a really big missing point of Edge of Fate, is just we didn't get much to the sandbox. So I will be making some build videos. They probably won't be quite as frequent as before because my life has gotten very busy on the side, but I do like doing these, and it is fun to just hear what other things people are looking at. With that, I just want to briefly thank my channel members, which are D3 Fint, Monty KY, Wolfgame07, Velvet Hammer, Equitas, Maddie the Ace, Davey0011, Aradriel. You guys are all great. I really appreciate you continuing to support me even though I wasn't making content, and I fully understand people that had to stop being channel members during that. I even encourage people to because I didn't know when I would be coming back, but I do plan to keep making content as long as Destiny keeps making solid content and changes that are worthy of cool builds. So that's all I've got. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.